Welcome to the Rock is George podcast. I'm your host, George Dionne, and this is episode 81. Thank you for tuning into the podcast, whether it's through our website, rockisgeorge.com, or through our YouTube page, or on one of the many podcasting streaming apps, or through the loudest.com on the planet, KNAC.com. My guest for this episode is David Reece of Iron Allies. Iron Allies is a project put together by David and German guitarist Herman Frank. Both David Reece and Herman Frank were in the German heavy metal band Accept. You may know their song Balls to the Wall. Herman and David were in the band at different times. They didn't actually play in the band together. Herman has a successful solo career now that he's no longer with Accept. He also has his Victory project. David Reece works on many projects as well, and he has a solo career. His last solo album was Blacklist Utopia. Fantastic album, and the one that preceded that, Cacophony of Souls, was just as good. Iron Allies is a new project, and their debut album is called Blood In, Blood Out. Comes out on October 21st through AFM Records. And here's David Reece to tell you all about it. If I knew absolutely nothing about Iron Allies, how would you describe the band's music to me?
We sat down, Herman and I, and discussed our influences. We both come from the British wave, obviously, early 80s, included a lot of that. And, his crunching riffs, unmistakable. I try to do as much melodic, heavy vocal lines as I can, with everything I do. I would say it sounds nothing like Victory or David Reece solo, which is something I think we achieved. Of course, we considered that, we can't do that. Let's just go gang, 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 let's go heavy. And I'm really pleased with how it came out, man. It worked.
I mean, obviously, you guys were both in the German heavy metal act, Accept back in the day, but you never were in it together. Whose idea was it to bring Iron Allies together?
Actually, Herman, messenger. One day out of the blue, I got a message from him. It would be April of last year, saying, hey, would you be interested in trying to write some songs together and see what happens? And I said, absolutely. Funny thing about Herman and I, different tenures in the band, we never personally met. I've said it in other interviews. We played some of the same shows, festivals, and missed each other by, a day or hours on our set list. And I always wanted to reach out and, shake his hand and say hello, but we never personally had met. Kind of a shock that he reached out to me, but I'm very pleased he did.
Now, this album wasn't put together the way that that current lockdown albums were put together over the computer. I'm sure you guys exchanged files and whatnot, but you actually got together in a recording studio in Hanover, Germany to put the final touches on it, correct?
Yeah. He sent me, I think, 2 tracks in the beginning just as a sample to see what I thought. When something gets me, my hand just starts scribbling, and I have like 2 or 3 phones going at one time with a Bose mini link, and I start singing out loud. And quite frankly, I recorded, I think the second day, those 2 tracks and sent them back to him. And the next day after that, I got a video of him. It was just his cowboy boots and the horns and him tapping his foot, listening on the computer. I said, so you likey, Herman? And he's like, me likey a lot. So, from there, it just flew. I think by August of last year, we had written 15 or so tracks, and we picked our favorite 12.
Yeah, okay. How did the rest of the band come together? How did you get Malty and Francisco and Mike involved in this?
Well, Mike plays with Herman in Victory, and actually I helped get Malta in Victory because they were without a bassist for a while. But I played with Malta for a long time. We had gone through a lot of star power guys when they kind of caught wind what we were up to. A lot of emails started coming in. Hey, I want to do this. I want to do this. But for them, it was more like, a paycheck and a project. And that's not what we wanted. So after going through the piles of people and, the egos and just the weird, connection that just didn't feel right. I said to him one day, I go, what are we doing? Francesco played on Blacklist Utopia and Malta. Malta and I had written that album together basically. And he said, yeah, but that's kind of weird. He goes, I've got, Malta jamming with me now and you've got Francesco. Won't it look kind of strange? I said, I don't care. It's a cohesive bunch of guys who, first of all, we get along really well. We've been around the globe multiple times. So why not? He said, yeah, you're right. Let's do this. And he said, let's bring Mike in because he had been touring with Mike and Herman Frank and Victory as well. And as a guitar team, it works. So it's kind of tough to get guitar players to play well together. It's always a challenge. Yeah, that's kind of how that all fell into place.
And the new album is Blood In, Blood Out. It comes out on October 21st on AFM Records. How did the songwriting work with you and Herman? I know he's pretty prolific when it comes to not just the guitar, but also writing lyrics.
He handed the lyric duties over to me. He kind of said he was tired of doing it. He was chock full. His brain was full from the Herman Frank solo album, and then the Victory thing came out, I think, fairly close together. The song Blood In, Blood Out, though, I had a different title for it. And I was just having a chat with him one day that I just finished a documentary. We were doing our WhatsApp coffee talk, and I said "Blood In, Blood Out," and he goes, "That's a better title for that song than the other one you have." And he went, "Blood In, Blood Out," and I went, "Okay." So then I kind of looked at that documentary and I kind of wove it together with the inner gang violence in prison systems and stuff. And I kind of thought about it in a rock and roll way that, we all kind of sacrifice ourselves at the altar, I guess, for what we do because it's day in and day out. There's once you're in, and then the only way out is either you put your hat up or you just keep going till you keel over. Yeah, that's how that happened. But the lyrics, I mean, I pretty much was the guy given the freedom to write about what I thought about, and his riffs just kind of make me speak. I don't know. It's a weird thing. I'm not going to question it because it works.
Couple songs that you've released so far. You mentioned one is Blood In, Blood Out, and I wanted to talk about Full of Surprises, which sort of I interpret as the surprise is you two actually getting together and putting this project out.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go back a few years, I mean, I had released Blacklist Utopia, and literally the following week, Cadogno, the village where I was recording, was locked down. I couldn't go to the studio the next day. I didn't know what was happening. Some people said it was a terrorist attack. That's a surprise. I mean, I wasn't allowed to leave my house for 6 months. My wife would do the shopping and go to work alone because her job was shut down except for one or two people. Also, the vocal thing is kind of a machine gun style vocal phrasing, and it's kind of a System of a Down vibe. I felt because I'd seen them live a few times years ago, and blown away by their timing and everything. So it had kind of a Schenker vibe, the riff, but then the phrasing, it just seemed like that attack was called for. But yeah, it's about everything's a surprise to me. Well, I shouldn't say anymore. I mean, as much as we've been through, all of us in this world, every day you wake up, it's like, now what? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Another song you have out that you've released ahead of the album is Destroyers of the Night, sort of, I think, anthemic in a way.
That's going to be the next video. We shot Blood In, Blood Out and Destroyers of the Night the same day. We all went back up to Hanover a few months ago. With the budget and the time and everything, we were forced into doing that. And Francesco and I, the drummer, the drum endorsement companies with all the restrictions with gasoline and shipping and everything, it was unbelievable what they wanted to charge him, his endorsement company, to ship hardened case drums to Hanover from Holland, I think it was. So he said, we're driving. I'm like, dude, that's 18 hours, and then we got to shoot all day tomorrow. He goes, let's go. So that's how we pulled it off. He wanted his kit in the video, and I said, I get it. You know, he might have ended up with some weird off-brand or something that just didn't feel right. So
You got to have a little bit of rock star
you
eccentricity.
got to do it, man. I mean, you want to play your kit, and he's got some amazing drum sets, and I mean, they look cool. They're cool just to look at. So
You guys are releasing the album on multiple formats. You got digital, you got CD, you got a vinyl. Are you a fan of vinyl yourself? It seems to be making a huge comeback.
absolutely. I mean, it's what I started on. You know, I have a massive, my wife and I, collection down in the cantina. We got lucky because we had another flat and it flooded. We had it down in the basement cantina area, and we'd, you know, intelligently, I guess, had put them in wax covered boxes and plastic. So we probably have 1,000 copies of records from the 60s, 70s, 80s. And you should see my basement. It's walls of vinyl. So yeah, for me to hold a vinyl record and you know, I'm on it, it's you know, like, why did it ever stop? You know, I get technology and everything. I remember the CD boxes, they were really long. And when I got the Bangalore Choir album, I go, why is this little box or this long box have this CD inside? And they go, well, they haven't changed the shelves yet for vinyl. So when they thumb through it, you can see the title at the top. And I said, okay. So I saved one. I've actually still got it from like 1989, 1990. But you know, I'm a major fan of vinyl. I love the sound of the needle on the record. I've got an old Kenwood down there and a Pioneer, a JVC. But I went out shopping for new turntables not too long ago, and it was weird. I saw one with a laser, like a CD player. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't
It's
seen
kind of,
that yet.
yeah, it was weird. I was like, yeah, that's not a vinyl, you know. So where do I buy diamond needles? You know, of course, that's a challenge. So I haven't discovered that yet because I think the needles that I have would probably eat the plastic right off these records if I tried it.
So is Iron Allies going to be just a studio project, or are you guys going to try to take it on the road?
Take it on the road. Contradictory to what I said a few years ago, but being a solo artist is really free. Yeah, I mean, there's complications. I mean, you're dealing with the human aspect of it and stuff, and you not everybody's always happy all the time, but you kind of get to go, okay, I'll accept that booking and all those things that go along with it. It's your baby, and you're basically failure or success is all in your hands. It's a weird animal. I mean, it seems like rock and roll bands do everything in their power every day to break up. You know, the successful bands or well-known guys will do everything in their power just to destroy it. I don't know what that is, but this is a band. To be honest, you know, when you have two guys like he and I from our past, it actually elevates the availability of bookings because there's a fan base. So business-wise, it's an intelligent move, I think, and having Francesco as well with his history because promoters want to put people in seats. And when you're solo, you know, you can do 50 people one night and 1,000 the next. There's really no steady venue opportunities and such. You know, you take what you can get kind of thing. So Herman and I are well aware that the combination is a step forward.
So, and it's safe to say that we'll probably hear more music down the road by you guys if you're going to
Yeah.
call this a
Yeah,
full-fledged band.
yes, absolutely. I mean, he's going to continue, I believe, with Victory. I am actually writing a new solo album. I don't know when I'm going to record it or what I'm going to do, but my focus is Iron Allies. We've got a great booking agency out of Berlin. There's a big bottleneck in the industry right now with shows. Seems like every night there's a band playing in every venue. I live in the north of Italy. He's in Germany. Francesco is here. But all the bands are playing catch up from their contracts from 2 years ago, 3 years ago. You know, it's funny because the fans, I went to see Ellis and Soto in a pretty good sized club, but the same week Testament was playing on the Friday and they were playing Thursday. So what you see is, you know, the limited amount of funds for a fan. Who do I go see? Right. So there's this influx of bands playing every night just to play and fulfill their commitments. because they've been canceled off 2 or 3 times. It's a bottleneck, and I think the early part of 23 will kind of open that up. So that's the plan, and we've got offers on table right now. Denmark, Scandinavia, all over Germany. We've talked to South America, Canada, and the U.S. Obviously, I mean, if we go into Canada, we're going to have to head south. Go in through New York, because that would be the right way to do it. The more touring I can get, the more shows I can do a day or a week. I mean, I mean, doing records is fine at home, but it's what's the point? It validates a group too. If you're out touring, everybody goes, "Man, that band's on tour too."
You mentioned that you're working on your next solo album, but it was just last year, and I think the new Iron Allies releases on the same date that your last solo album came out, Blacklist Utopia. Have you had a
No,
chance to October 21st? They both came out the same day or a year apart?
no, Blacklist I think came out in March of 2021. Yeah, I don't know, 2020, because it was the week before. It was the 13th of March, actually. And that week is when the world came to an end, so to speak. I lost about 50 shows that I booked. I just quit looking at emails. I couldn't take it anymore.
Have you had
So
a
I have
chance
done a
though?
few projects. Huh?
Good. You've done a few projects. Good.
Yeah, I did the album with Wicked Sensation. I'd done one with them back in 2014, and they called me, and that came out in December of last year. Great album. Same producer, Dennis Ward. I did a record for a Bulgarian group called John Steele, and I was really fortunate. I didn't know what to do. Obviously, I started getting all these phone calls because everybody was, doing nothing. And one thing that I did that was kind of interesting was a little project thing called Highway Sentinels. Are you aware of that?
No.
It's weird because Jimmy Waldo from Alcatraz reached out to me and said that he and Steve used to write for, I think, Guitar World and Rolling Stone. And Steve would always say to the guys like Eddie and Gilbert and all those guys, once I do a record, I want you to do a solo. And yeah. Well, out of the blue, he calls me and says, "Hey, you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And I didn't have any idea who was playing on the album. I just thought Jimmy was writing the songs with Steve. So I agreed to do it. Unbeknownst to me, you've got Bumblefoot, Paul Gilbert, Satriani, and all these guys. So I thought, wow, I'm in the company of kings. This record's going to be great, which it is, but it didn't really stick. Nobody cared. I mean, you had all this star power behind it, and it's kind of just been, it came out in July and just drifted off by the wayside. And in the interim, I had found there was a guy that was holding hostage all my demos from Bangalore Choir from the beginning of On Target. What he had done was he had gone into the studio after he was fired and told the studio that I wanted the masters, and they opened the safe and he took them. And on there were 10 tracks that I really wanted on the album, at the label, the suit and tie guys said, no, we're going to do this. And I followed like a sheep and agreed to it. But we found these tracks. We finally got them. So I had them remixed and mastered, and I released that. It's called Beyond Target. It's on Global Rock Records out of the UK. So that was kind of cool, listening back to what we'd recorded, 8-track stuff. And we'd actually done a bunch of the demos at A&M, and because we had access, because our manager was the personal assistant to Stevie Nicks. So he had a hookup with Jimmy Iovine at A&M. So we'd go in at like midnight and stay there till 6, excuse me, and 7 a.m. But they would bring out reels of tape for us to use. And the whole session that we did there was recorded over U2 Joshua Tree. And we'd listen to those guys talking and arguing in their Irish accents. And I saved one that we didn't record off, and dude, I lost it. I mean, I don't know what it'd be worth now, but I had it with me for years, and I can't find it. I'm sick about it. But you could sit and listen to Bono and the Edge screaming at each other about a part or mistakes. But we recorded over that for demos. So a lot of the stuff that's on this Beyond Target is stuff from those sessions and 8-track that we had at our rehearsal room. So it was kind of cool.
Who was the girl on the missile in on the On Target cover?
that manager's girlfriend, ex-wife now, the assistant to Stevie Nicks, which is another suit and tie call. I had nothing to do with that. She was a model, I guess, and hey, she's going to be on the cover. Oh, thanks for letting us know. You know, but when you're in the corporate world, weird things happen, and so we played along, and everybody seemed to like it. The dudes liked it, so kind of apropos for those days, right? The cleavage and everything it was about the end of rock as we knew it in those days. So it even gave the grunge purists more to kill us with. The cover. It was everything they hated. The guys with the greasy hair and the flannel shirts. So,
Do you have a chance to go out and perform your solo stuff or the Bangalore Choir stuff?
I just did a show in Hamburg about 3 weeks ago. I headlined the Friday night. It was sold out at the Markthalle. That weekend they had, Ronnie Atkins, they had Heat, they had everybody's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I showcased a bunch of that stuff and some of my solo material, and I played some off the Eat the Heat. Fantastic. We had Jackie, the sound man from Saxon, running our sound. He's amazing. And we actually recorded it. And when I listened back to it, I'm like, oh my God, because I've got this young bunch of cats here in my village with a studio that are also amazing players. And I was going to bring in a collective of guys I've worked with all around the world. And I started looking at the flight costs. I go, well, have I lost my mind? That's 3 times the budget they're offering me for the gig. And my wife said, why don't you just get these Italian guys that you're recording with? They're amazing players. And I went, good idea. So we rehearsed for 2 straight weeks. I mean, they were telling me what I was singing wrong and doing wrong. And they played their asses off. It turned out amazing. I mean, I saved it. I'm going to mix it and maybe release it one day.
I know we're talking Iron Allies and we're talking David Reece. And do you have any other projects that you're kind of working on that we can look forward to in the future?
No, I'm contractually obligated to focus on this. It's crazy because I did all that stuff during lockdown. And, I got this contract from AFM and they said nothing 90 days prior, nothing 90 days after release. So I sent out the mass email and they're like, we're not going to be held hostage by any other label. And I said, you can't release it after. So I think July 21st, 3 albums that I did during lockdown were released the same day. Not a very good business move, but it had to be done. It worked out, but it was kind of weird. I was like, oh my God, there's another record I did. And some of them I'd forgotten about. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, this looks ridiculous. But right now I'm focused on this. I mean, I'm not going to sit down and tell you that all the stuff that's sitting here on the table is David Reece solo, because there's a lot of stuff that would fit Herman perfectly. I have a new one today that I've been piddling around with. It would right up our alley lyrically, and it just feels like it would be great for the next Iron Allies album. I hope to do as many as possible with him.
Yeah, the album is great. I mean, I was very
Thank you.
impressed with it. It didn't sound like you said in the beginning, didn't sound like Victory, didn't sound like Herman Frank, doesn't sound like David Reece, doesn't sound like, except you guys actually crafted your own sound.
Thank you. And when you point that out, that brings joy to my heart. Everybody says that, and we were of course concerned about it, but we hadn't met, like I mentioned earlier, and I got to really get to know Dave thing happened. He called me one day and said, I'm driving to Italy. My wife and I, we're going to hang out. Find me a real authentic Italian restaurant with handmade food. And there happened to be one close by that's been there for 100 years. And I took him there. And we sat for probably 8 hours just talking. And we discussed our influences after the 2 tracks that were recorded, or maybe a few more after that. And he said, Dave, I'm British German metal. That's who I am. I'm not going to compromise if I do this. This is what I am. So if you don't want to do that, tell me now, and I'm going to walk away. I said, no, because I am too. I have a really strange guilty pleasures in music. One of my favorite artists is Tom Petty. I love Greg Allman, and of course the great Paul Rodgers. I mean, I listen to that stuff and Crosby, Stills, and Nash practically every day when I'm doing my vocal workouts, because it's tough stuff and it's good for the voice and the ear and harmonies and all that. So I do have that 70s influence, in my heart. But I also, when the British Wave came in, as when I was just kicking off in my club days, and we had to cover Priest, Maiden, Accept. Were kind of a new thing because Faster the Shark was just mind-boggling when it came out. None of us in America knew what is this, the Heidi Ho intro, and then just like what? So we had to cover all that stuff to get paid. So that was a big part of my live life, But personally, at home, I listen to Eagles, stuff like that. Foreigner,
I
the
could see
greats,
that. Stuff with
I
strong
mean,
harmonies that kind of helps build the voice and kind of, I think it's kind of lost today, but the strong harmony stuff that of the 70s and the 80s, I mean, very, very popular. And I think it transcends time.
yeah, I mean, it's timeless. I mean, and I'm not exactly your Freddie Mercury vocal genius. I mean, for harmonies, I tend to need to really work on that. So I've always forced myself to train my ear, and I work fortunately with a lot of guys that are, because I used to produce myself a lot, and I had the setup. Maybe we talked about this, but when you have your own studio, especially singers, because we're all insane, you go on and record a track and you think, God, I'm great. This is fabulous. And then you play it for a friend and they go, oh, it's a pretty good song. And then they kind of say, yeah, but maybe you could have. So what I did was I said, enough, enough. I need somebody behind the glass pushing me. And Herman, and I'm not, and no joke, he doesn't play games. I mean, he gets a thought in his head how he wants a vocal line, and he'll go to war over it. So that was really good for me in Hanover at Horse Studios to see you can read people through the glass. If they're feeling it, they're moving. If they're just kind of going like this, staring at the board, it ain't grabbing them. I need that extra kick in the ass to be better. A lot of singers think whatever they do is fabulous. It's so far from the truth. That's why they have producers.
Those are all the questions I have for you today, David. The new album is Iron Allies, Blood In, Blood Out. It comes out October 21st on AFM Records. It's fantastic. I hope you do
Thank
really
you.
well with it.
Thank you. And go to Iron Allies Facebook. We have a fan club page. David Reece Official, Herman Frank. There's 2 videos out, as you mentioned, full of surprises and Blood In, Blood Out. The next one is Destroyers of the Night. October 20th is the release day for that, and the album is the next day. We have white vinyl limited available, black vinyl, digipack, everything. And I ask everybody if they can, to buy physical, because the streaming thing is not helping anybody. And hopefully we can come to a venue near you. Where are you located at?
Massachusetts.
You're in Mass. Whereabouts?
Plymouth.
Cool, man. Is this radio that we're doing?
We're doing the Rockish George podcast, which is just Spotify and Apple and streaming sites and YouTube. But I also have a working relationship with KNAC out of California, and they'll feature the episode as well. So,
you know my KNAC story? You want to hear it?
Sure.
Back in the days, right? KNAC were really behind me when they were in Long Beach. Bangalore Choir, we used to do Wednesday nights when we were home at these places called the Red Onion, and they were acoustic nights. And KNAC would provide limousines, pick us up. It was great. It'd be, 500 people having dinner, drinking, kind of a restaurant setting thing. It was a weekly deal, right? So one night we got into this huge band brawl. We'd all had way too much to drink, and we're in the back of the limo, and this brawl broke out in the back of this limo that KNAC had bought for us to use, rented. The next morning I woke up, black eye, cuts on my face. I'm like, oh God, what do we do? And the phone's ringing, and it's the assistant to Stevie Nicks going, what in the hell happened last night? I'm like, what, man? It's like noon, right? Get your ass down to this limousine company right now. And first, I want you to stop at KNAC because they're going to stop playing your songs. And we had great airplay, I'm like, uh-oh. So I was still dressed, ran out of the house, drove to Long Beach from LA, which is a pretty long haul. And usually when Dave walked into KNAC radio, everybody's like, hey, Dave, I walked in, nobody looked at me. I said, I'm in trouble. walked into the PD. They threw a bill on the table that had been faxed, $12,000 for damages of a car. And I'm like, they pointed at it and said, we're not paying for this. Fix it. Or, your airtime is probably going to disappear. So, long story short, I raced down to this limousine company, which is another hour away. And there's this white Continental with the doors open, and all the lining and the ceiling is hanging. There's smashed glass everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God. So I walk in and the guy goes, what do you want? Who are you? And I said, I'm the guy that was in the limo last night. He starts screaming at me. And I'm like, okay, cool it, calm down, and we'll work this out. And how dare you? My driver said you terrified him. You guys were going insane, like bands do. Ironically, he asked me, well, what band are you in? And I told him, Bangalore Choir. And he goes, oh, my son's a big fan of you guys. And I said, really? So I just happened to have in the trunk of my car those long CD boxes, like a box of them. And I pulled them out. And I'm just sweating bullets from the drinking the night before, which incidentally I know I don't do anymore. But I said, can I sign some for these for you and your family? And the guy's mood just went and calmed down. And he said, you know what, dude? I understand. It's insured. Let's just call it a day. I apologize for screaming at you. Thanks for being so nice and coming down here and signing these for me and my family. So I went back to my apartment and I called my manager. He's like, all right, man, what's going on? What happened? What are you going to do? I said, everything's cool. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, the guy said, forget about it. I signed a bunch of CDs and he told me it's okay now. But those are my days at KNAC when they were on the big station down in Long Beach. And I can tell you, man, I was in full panic mode. I was sweating bullets. I thought, man, I've done it now. I just got added to radio and oh my God. Bad night.
It sounds like rock and roll to me, though, so it's not a bad story.
Yeah, the guitar player looked at me after 4 or 5 shots of Jack and said, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be in this band. And I formed the band, and that's all I remember. There was fist flying and boots going and cigarettes in people's mouths, burning, carpet. It was on, and the guy had the window cracked down, and he's screaming, stop it. And he's going to go doing this down the 101, swerving, because we're rocking this thing, man. We're fist fighting 5 guys. And we had a guy with us with a video camera. And I ripped the tape out of it and shredded it because I said, this is not going public, the next day. Do you want to see something funny? I go, no. I don't even want to remember that. But that is, since you're connected to KNAC, hopefully I won't get another bill. But that's my KNAC story.
Well, we won't rent you any more limos, that's for sure.
Thank you. I don't need one. I don't even want to see one.
Well, David, thanks for coming on the Rock is George podcast. I appreciate you taking the time. Iron Allies, great album, Blood In, Blood Out.
Yeah, good to see you, brother. Thanks very much for your help. And everybody, we're going to see you soon. I know it's going to happen. Please, if you can afford it, please purchase the record. And if you can't, I understand, but come see us live if we're in your town.
Once again, I want to thank David Reece of Iron Allies for coming on the Rock is George podcast. Be sure to check out Iron Allies' latest album, Blood In, Blood Out. Head over to your favorite music streaming app, take a listen. If you like what you hear, buy a physical copy of the album, support the artist. For all things Iron Allies, head over to iron-allies.com. For more about David Reece, head over to davidreeceofficial.info. I also want to thank Dustin Hardman of AFM Records for making this interview possible. You've been great. I've been George Dionne. I'll see you again soon.